Now, stakeholders are opposing the planned 5% fuel surcharge set to begin on the 1st of January 2026. Petron warned it could force petrol retailers to close. Civil society groups, including the Joint Action Front, vowed to mobilize Nigerians against the move, calling it insensitive. Experts say the levy could increase fuel prices, hitting low and middle income households the hardest, while raising costs for transportation, energy, and manufacturing. Opposition leaders like Peter Obi and the ADC described the tax as cruel amid rising hardship, questioning the government's revenue claims. Economists warn that the surcharge, if introduced without safeguards, could worsen inflation and public discontent, noting that Nigerians are still adjusting to subsidy removals and exchange rate shocks.
Well, for more on this and to help us take a look at Nigeria's tax and fiscal roadmap, we're joined in the studio by the chairman of the Presidential Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms Committee, Mr. Taiwo Oyedele. Mr. Oyedele, good morning and a warm welcome to the program today. It's a pleasure to be in conversation with you.
Good morning, Adesua. Good morning, everyone.
All right, now let's get straight into it. We begin with the 5% fuel levy that has propped up again. Of course, we understand the historical antecedent of this tax, and the feedback so far, or rather the communication from this administration, from yourself, is that it's not confirmed that this tax will be implemented in January, that there's a possibility. To kick off this conversation, I'd like to know, what are those factors that will determine whether or not this 5% fuel levy is going to kick off from January 2026?
Thank you very much. I think it's important to make clarifications, so we are speaking to facts. Otherwise, we may just be dissipating energy unnecessarily as a people. So first, there's no planned introduction of a surcharge. There is no proposal to introduce a surcharge. The 5% surcharge is not new. So like some of the explainers we have put out. So this is something that has been in the law since 2007. So what we are doing as part of the tax reform is to repeal so many laws and just have our tax laws in one decent, easy to read and understand document. So while we had over 15, 20 different laws we have consolidated, it doesn't mean that all those old laws were useless and we needed to just write everything afresh. So in the process of trying to harmonize, you will make that call as to whether a particular tax makes sense for us to sustain it, or whether it should be repealed, or whether it should be modified. And we need to remind ourselves that when you write a tax law for a country, you're not writing it for the moment. You're writing it for generations to come. So it may not be something you do today, it may be something you do in 5 years' time, maybe something you do in 10 years' time, and it could be something you do tomorrow, literally. So what we've done in the new tax laws, and by the way, it wasn't even in the proposal that Mr. President submitted, this was in the course of legislating on the bills that this came up. Instead of FEMA to collect the tax and try to administer it, we thought it's not appropriate for an agency of government to be collecting taxes. So the first thing we did was, should this tax become necessary, let it be collected by the Nigerian Revenue Service, and let the the funds from that tax be dedicated into road infrastructure. Many of us travel around the world, and you find many countries where fuel prices are more expensive than Nigeria.
Yes. Mr. Oyedele, I think you've just chimed into the question that I actually asked you, which is, if this tax is to be found necessary, what will make this tax necessary?
Yeah, absolutely. So the point is that, first and foremost, you go to different countries around the world where fuel prices are more expensive than Nigeria, but transportation is more affordable. I traveled on the road just this past few days over the weekend, altogether for more than 10 hours, and it was a nightmare. So many countries, over 150 countries around the world, try to get dedicated resources to build and maintain road infrastructure because it has a ripple effect that is very positive. So for me, and this is speaking for myself, is that the appropriate time to consider a tax like that would be number one, when you have an appreciation in the currency. So if Naira appreciates by just 5%, you will collect this tax and there will be no change in the pump price of petroleum products. It could also be when you have a decline in the international price of crude oil, and it could be a combination of both. So the right strategy would be, when can you have this tax introduced without it impacting on the people negatively? Whereas on the positive side, the revenue you then get from this tax would have real, practical, physical impact on the people. If you can travel for less time, it's safer, you save even more money, not only on fuel, time, but also productivity. Yes. So I'm not promoting the surcharge. I'm only just explaining it because I know that a lot of people are just angry about talking about anything tax.
Yeah, let's move on from this surcharge to something you have promoted actually, which is an increase in the payment, or the salaries rather, for the president and members of office. Do you find it difficult to argue for an increase of that type of thing during the situation? As you said, a lot of people argue that it's a difficult time for Nigerians, but considering the temperature in the land, increasing salaries for political office holders, increasing the tax burdens for Nigerians, introducing things like the tax ID, and maybe at some point in time a fuel tax hike. How do you argue for those things, and then also argue that we should increase the salaries of political office holders?
Yeah, no, I'm not arguing and promoting for increase in salary of political holders. Maybe you took me out of context. So my view is that if you know how much political office holders earn, and you have to ask yourself, do you want the right people in leadership, or do you want people who pretend that it's okay for, maybe a minister to earn 1 million naira and it's just fine? So someone like me, for example, I was in the private sector. The amount of money I earn in a month, actually the amount of money government was going to pay me in a month was what I earned in a day. So I said, there's no need for government to pay me. So I'm doing the work I'm doing now pro bono, and I'm able to do that because I have the resources to sustain myself. Imagine that I'm a honest Nigerian who is competent and wants to serve, but I don't have the resources. I have two options: either to go into public service and steal government money, or not to go at all. But we need to get to a point. I think it was Lincoln and you that made this point. If you want a government that is cheap, you get the outcome that you desire or that you want. I'm not promoting any increases in anybody's salary. I think the context in which you quoted me must have been an engagement where I said that oftentimes it's a lot easier to speak truth to power than it is to speak truth to the masses. Because you'll be popular when you said to everybody, "Oh, don't increase their salary, let them earn minimum wage." You can say that and you'll be popular. But realistically, in which part of the world would a minister or governor or president earn minimum wage and you have a country that is thriving? You won't find any. So really, for me, I'm neither here nor there, just about whatever the people want. But let's make sure we work based on facts and think about what is good for our country.
Thank you, Mr. Oyedele, for that clarification. I quite enjoyed how you really just brought out your point with that. But let's keep with speaking about the specifics about things. How will these tax laws help improve the everyday lives of Nigerians and make things more affordable? Can you give us specific areas in how this will happen?
Yeah, interestingly, we spent all the time trying to put all of this together, and I was even challenging some journalists recently to say people should tell us the new taxes that this current administration has introduced. You will struggle to find any. Most of them, if not all of them, were introduced by previous administrations, and many of them, in fact, the very first set of executive orders that President Tinubu signed were 4 orders suspending different taxes that had been introduced. This was as early as, I think it was July 2023, just barely 2 months in office. So when people hear about tax, their immediate reaction is to just want to fight. Whereas these reforms are saying, let's reduce the burden of tax. If I want to reduce the burden of tax, I still have to call tax. But the fact that it says tax reform does not mean that we are introducing new taxes and increasing the burden. We're actually reducing them. For the vast majority of Nigerians, low-income earners will pay no income tax at all, middle-income earners will pay less, and then the high net worth individuals will pay a bit more, which is what you find everywhere in the world if you don't want to promote inequality. Unfortunately, bad news tends to sell better.
Right.
We've seen a lot of viral videos of people who have no clue about finance, accounting, or tax, just making up stories about what people will pay, and those things go viral. And then you go to our platforms where we've analyzed everything. We even have a tax calculator where you can put today, you can go there now and put your salary information and to tell you the taxes. Those things never go viral. So, but we have to keep, doing the best we can to communicate, and hopefully people get the right information so they can make the right decisions about their country.
Okay, just for the purpose of clarification now, you will be changing, according to the Nigeria Revenue Service Act, you will be changing the name from the Federal Inland Revenue Service to the Nigeria Revenue Service. So how does this change the revenue structure for the country? And also, could you also clarify the VAT sharing formula amongst the 3 tiers of government, which was a major fly in the ointment at the plenary hearing of the bill, which stipulates 10% for federal, 55% for states, and also 35% for the local government areas?
Yeah, no, the VAT issue was, I think, was overflogged at the time. In fact, there was a point where you would think the whole tax reform was on VAT sharing formula. Our principals, let me call them our principals, who are the governors, who mostly will share, along with their local government, 90% of VAT revenue. They told us what they wanted, and that's what we implemented. So that's in the law. So progress does not have to be all overnight. It could also be gradual. So I think we're moving in the right direction. On the Nigerian Revenue Service versus FRS, what we've had historically has been the Federal Inland Revenue Service, which on one hand presupposes that that agency is the agency of the federal government. Whereas if you think about the taxes that the FRS collects, they go into the federation and they belong to the federation. So the name is even misleading. So we thought, first, let's call it Nigeria, okay, not federal. So it's Nigeria Revenue Service. Number 2 is to try and expand the scope and mandate of what that agency will be doing, similar to what you find in many countries. It is not ideal for us to have over 60 agencies of government chasing revenue and levies. They do not understand policies thinking behind them. They're not efficient in collecting them. They're wasteful. They're not transparent in how those things are accounted for. You end up with a situation where the people pay more and government collects less. So we said, well, let's just harmonize everything into one place. So the NRS would then be collecting levies and taxes for the federation and for the federal government. But I need to point out that for the state, they continue to have the independence to collect their own taxes. Although in a more smaller perspective, the Internal Revenue Service of a state should equally be solely responsible for collecting all taxes and levies at the state level. And then those states with the NRS would then connect and collaborate to form these one, point of truth, data, intelligence, capacity building, and everything for our country in a unified manner. So that's really the regime we are moving into.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Now, your portfolio includes fiscal policy, and I think that's very important to bring into this conversation because, of course, we're still, we're still listening to various commentary that came from the president's comment recently that we've met our revenue targets. We've done so, of course, way ahead of schedule. And, of course, this is also coming in the context that we're looking at the 2024 budget, which is said to be around 80% implementation or performance rather at this stage. Of course, numbers for 2025 budget wouldn't be available, but we've been assured that there won't be a supplementary budget for 2025. My question is, are you satisfied with how this increased revenue is being executed? Because many people are still saying on the fiscal policy side, we're not seeing enough austerity where we want to see it, that people are not yet feeling the impact of this increase in revenue. So given that you manage these two portfolios together, are you satisfied with what this increased revenue is being used to execute on the ground, even though on the grassroots people are saying they're not feeling the impact?
Yes, you're right that the mandate given to my committee is broader than tax, although we're not responsible for that. We're just supporting the government. So you easily say the finance minister and the president responsible for fiscal matters at the federal level. But our role is to provide support. And we've done a lot of work beyond tax. We've done issues around government budget, spending, even borrowing, and coordination of policies with key organs like monetary policy, trade policy, and those work are continuing, as well as coordination across subnational. Unfortunately, those are not very popular issues. So if you call for a town hall meeting and you want to talk about fiscal matters, nobody will show up. In fact, before the controversy about the tax laws, nobody was showing up because it wasn't of interest to them. If you talk about creating local government and new states, you see everybody will show up. So sometimes our priority, we also need to rethink them in a general way. So but having said that, it's also important that when you talk about revenue, we put it in proper perspective. So if you plan to spend 1 million naira and you expect to generate 600,000 naira, we will say you have a deficit because you're spending more than you plan to generate. That means you need to borrow 400,000 naira. Now, if you end up generating 700,000 naira, you've exceeded the revenue you budgeted for, but it doesn't mean that you're fine because your spending is still 1 million. You still have to borrow 300,000. So I know some of the comments that Mr. President made, people did not understand the context. So when you say you've exceeded your non-oil revenue generation, first you're talking about just one aspect of revenue, which is non-oil. It doesn't mean that oil revenue has met its budget. Even if both had exceeded, it does not mean that that amount is up to the amount of the budget for the year. If you look at the budget, and you already mentioned the number, you see the deficit there is significant. And generally, you find for a country to really make progress, the amount of spending of government as a percentage of GDP should be in the region of 15% or more. Nigeria is spending less than that. While we need to be efficient in how we spend our money, we also need to generate more revenue in a way that does not create distortion in the economy and does not overburden the vulnerable population. Until you find that formula, it will be hard to make real progress.
Okay, if I get you clear, we could see that the essence of this tax reform is to widen the nation's revenue baskets. So what are you promising the citizens if you are taking more from them or you are deepening the basket of collection? What should they be expected? Because we are in an era of huge infrastructural deficits and there is hunger in the land, let me put it precisely.
Yeah, so I don't know whether...
I think we might have to take that question offline, unfortunately, because as you know, it is 7:57. The morning show team are on standby to come and join, to come and begin their own program. Mr. Taiwo Oyedele, this was an absolute pleasure to be in conversation with you. Please come back again so Wega can ask that question and we can finish off more of our thoughts because we still have plenty to discuss with you. But that's all we have time for here on Daybreak. I'm Vimbai Mutiniri Ekpeyong.
And I'm being Ashiro. It's goodbye from me.
As always, Adesa Giwal-Sage, thank you for joining us and we'll see you tomorrow.
And I'm Yolanda Robert. Please do keep it here on Arise News. The morning show is next. Goodbye.